In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a covered deck that's attached to the house, and this is going to be step by step from setting the posts, from putting on the decking, and putting on the roof. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. This channel is all about DIY to save a ton of money, so be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get a notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask in return for making this video. So we got a lot to go over today, so let's get started. This is where the two front 6x6 posts are going to sit in order to support the front of the deck. And what we did for a footer is we dug a 2-foot circumference and 36 inches deep to get below the frost line, and we filled this full of concrete. Then we formed this up so that it'll come up to where the concrete slab will just be over this area. So that way we don't have any wood down in concrete, because wood down in concrete will definitely rot over time. It's best to keep it up out of it if you can. But if you do place it down in the ground, the 6x6 posts are meant for dirt and ground contact. And as far as how we're going to anchor the post, we had the Simpson Strong Tie Z-Max Retrofit base. And how this is going to work, we placed anchor bolts down into the concrete, and we're going to sit this right over the anchor bolt and then bolt it down before placing our post. And this can be adjusted this way or this way, so if you have to manipulate this, just know that it can really only be moved in the direction of the slot. So we're going to place it here like so. We're going to use a galvanized washer and place it over the bolt, then a galvanized nut, and this is a 3/4 inch nut. We're going to place that down tight against that washer. Using a 3/4 inch socket, we're going to tighten that up. And that's all there is to installing the base. We are now going to install the ledger board against the band board. And in order to do that, we must flash between the band board and the ledger board. And to do that, we're going to use vinyl flashing. You never want to use metal flashing against a pressure treated board, because it will deteriorate it over time because it has a chemical reaction. So with this vinyl flashing, you install it in the exact same way though. We're going to place it tight against this band board and tack it on for now, because once we place that ledger board against it, it's really going to secure it. And another thing, you see this house wrap hanging down? We're going to actually lift it up and place it underneath of it, so that way any moisture that comes down will go over the vinyl. And you may be thinking, if we have the house wrap in between the ledger board and the flashing, won't that protect the flashing from the board? Technically or theoretically, it probably would, but by code here, if we have a pressure treated board, we must use vinyl flashing. So we're going to err on the side of caution, obviously, and place the vinyl flashing. We're going to lift the house wrap up out of the way so we can install the flashing. We're just going to place this right here at the end of the deck, and you can go past it. It ain't that big deal. You just don't want to be too short. And we're going to place this flush to the top of the subfloor and more or less bottom of the sheathing. And we're going to tack this on with roofing nails. All right, we now have the flashing installed. Because we're using 5/4 board for our deck boards, we're going to find the bottom of that sheathing, which would be the top of the subfloor. We're going to measure down 5/4, which is 1 1/4 inches. Then we're going to chalk a line across here for the top of our ledger board. We're now going to chalk a line from mark to mark. We're going to be installing a 2x12 for our ledger board. The reason why we're going with this is because we're going to be having that as a skirt board. So in order to secure the skirt board to the ledger board, we want to use the same width. So we're going to cut this to length for our ledger board. We're going to place the ledger board up to that chalked line, and we're going to tack it onto the wall with temporary nails. The nails aren't going to be structural, they're just going to hold the board up until we bolt it to the wall. Because we're setting 6x6 posts that are 16 feet long, they're going to be tall and hard to set individually. So what we're going to do is cut our rim joists in our front header board, and then build a box more or less, and then level that up, and then set our post up to that in order to anchor the post down. And another thing about this is we're going to have to set this with temporary boards, so that way it's being held into place before we set our post. So we're going to cut Our rim joist and the outside of the deck is going to be 8 feet. So we got to cut 1.5 inches off our rim joists in order to get them to the correct length. So we're going to go ahead and cut those now. Pre-building the frame like we are doing here works for a smaller deck like this one. Now, if we were building a really large deck that was really far out from the house and also as the length of the house, this would be a very difficult process. But because of our situation here, this worked out great. So it depends on your situation if this would be feasible. Here's the bottom of the 2 posts we got to set. I'm going to use a 1-inch paddle bit to drill into the center, so that way it avoids hitting the bolt that's sticking up through the concrete. Now that we have this frame up, setting the post is going to be much easier. All we have to do is slide it up on top of the frame and then lift it and drop it right down onto the base. Then after we do that, we're just going to make sure everything's plumb and then nail into the post to hold it, so everything will be braced all in one shot. After we started handling the 16-foot posts and standing them up, we were very glad that we built the frame the way we did. It would have been nearly impossible to do this as smoothly and quickly as we did. Now, we could have set the post up and then put bracing with 2x4s to hold it straight up, but it was so tall, even then the stability would have worried me. Overall, the system worked great. Those posts were relatively heavy, but we got them up, and what we did after we placed them upright, we secured them with nails and screws. And then what we did was use our level to make sure it didn't need racked one way or the other, and it did. This top needed to go that way, so we placed this board, pressed down on it, got it racked correctly. We then placed cross bracing up here in the corner so that it held it into place. And also what we did was make sure that we were plumb this way as well, and we were. So everything here is set and ready to go. What we're going to install are the floor joists now. And they're going to be 93 inches, so we're going to cut them to length. But I'd like to mention that we're just going to nail them on for now using the galvanized nails. Then we're going to reinforce them with the correct joist hangers after we get them all set. Here's a quick pro tip. If you're designing your deck, make sure that you design it in the depth in which the decking boards break out evenly so you do not have any small rips, and do not forget to allow for an overhang. Because we are using a wide ledger board here, we do have to cut out for the door that's going to go here, and it's easier to do this now before we place the floor joists on. We now need to put our layout for where our floor joists are going to intersect the ledger board, and we're also going to do the same on the header board. And if you'll take note of the floor joists inside the house, we're just going to line those up with each other. So our floor joists coming in from the deck will be in line with those, because we got to tie these in together by code so that the deck cannot pull away from the house. So it's going to be held in by the floor joists on the inside, which is, again, code in our area. In order to get this to line up, we're going to place our speed square here and scribe the line to go line up our layout. And now we'll do 16 on center off that to line up for the rest of them. I thought it was important to mention that if you're using composite decking, a lot of times your joist can't be any further apart than 12 inches. And because we're using wood, we can get away with 16 inches. So you must think about that before framing your deck. In order to easily set the floor joist, we're going to place this scrap board right up here to hold the floor joist as we nail the one side. Then we'll come back through and secure this side. As he hands me up the floor joists, I'm just going to toe nail them into place and make sure we're flush with the top of this ledger board. This is not the permanent way we're going to secure it, because we still got to put the joist hangers. This just temporarily hold it. You don't want to put the joist hangers on first if you can avoid it, because there's different thicknesses of joists, so you're better off to toe nail these on first, then put the joist hanger on. Then we'll rinse and repeat that down this whole side. As he handed up the joist to me, I tacked the one side onto the ledger board as he set the other side up onto the shelf that we built with the 2x4. Then after we set all the joists, I nailed them from the header board on the outside to hold the joist into place on the other side. And you can see we have everything sitting into place where it belongs, so this is perfect before placing the joist hangers. The additional framing we must do around these posts in order to catch the decking boards, we must put blocks here, and that's going to act as a place to support your decking around this edge. Now, if you're going to have posts in the middle for railing, you're going to have to frame that in as well to give you a place to support the post and anchor it. But this deck is small enough to where we ain't going to need that. So because of that, all we have to do is add the blocks here and we're good to go. Here's a solid tip. While you're framing around the post, always treat that area like a high traffic zone. Posts usually end up right where people stand and lean and grab the railing or walk by. So if you don't give that area a solid support, there will eventually be movement and gaps and even crack the boards over time. We're now going to cut and install our first board. We always start from the outside of the deck and work towards the house. So if there's any cut piece, it's going to be at the end underneath the siding. So that's what you want. You don't want your cuts to come out here at the end of the deck. That looks really bad. So the first thing we need to do is just cut and measure around the post in order to get our first piece. Measure, we got 7 1/4 around this post. So we got 7 1/4, then 119 1/2 is from the end of the deck to the other side of the deck. And then we got 105, that's going to be the inside measurement from post to post. Here are the measurements on this side marked on the board, and we're going to cut this out with a circular saw, and then we're going to have to use a sawzall to finish up the cuts. And we'll plunge cut this middle, using a sawzall to finish up these cuts. And do the same to the other side. We're now going to place that board up here and then screw it down. And I'm using 3-inch deck screws using the star drive to drive them. And I'm going to pre-drill one on each end where the joist hits to tack it down for now. And now if this was a long run, we would chalk a line for our first board, but this board is a very short run. It's only 8 feet and these boards are really straight. So we really don't need a chalk line here. So we're going to go ahead and tack this first board down. That looks good. We're now going to pre-drill and screw it down. When you sink the screws, do not overdrive them. Just place them deep enough to where they're just slightly below the surface of the deck board. An easy way to accurately cut around the post, mark each side of the post once your board is placed up against it. Then you want to measure the space between that board and the previous deck board. Then use a speed square to mark the board where it needs cut out at. Then use a circular saw to plunge cut and cut that out, and finish up the cut using a reciprocating saw. And then place it tight up against the post after it's cut out, and you can see you have a beautiful cut around the post. And I'm going to secure this deck board down using a similar method that I described previously installing the first board. When installing pressure treated material, you want to make sure that you install them tight together like you see here, because the boards will shrink. Then that will allow the proper gap after it cures out. And if there's a cup in the board, you want to make sure you place the cup to where the cup is up, not down, because you do not want water laying in the cup. That is going to cause rot over time. And you can see the screws here. The reason why I place an inch from the edge at each joist is because I'll tack down all the decking boards first. Then after all the boards are down, I'll come back and place the screws here on this side. And then you'll notice I have an inch away from each side here, and I just guesstimated that as I installed them. But if you want them precise, just use a speed square, get them on the 1 inch mark and make a mark before placing your screw. And because this is a small deck, this is going to go relatively quick. You can see once we start off this edge, we'll get up to the house quickly. Now that we got the deck board started, in order to continue the deck boards, we obviously have to get on top of the floor joist. So in order to do that, to make sure that it is structurally sound, we're going to add joist hangers here in the back, and we're going to scab a board underneath this 2x12 to hold it temporarily. We're going to build a double ply 2x10 header, but we don't have the material here right now. We're still waiting on it. So once it gets here, we're going to lag that to this post. But for now, we're going to continue the floor joist, but we're going to scab and secure the joist first. We're going to temporarily put this 2x4 here like I was just explaining. And yes, the nails on the outside probably be enough for this little span temporarily, but we just want to make sure it's extra secure. All right, we're now going to place the joist hangers on the other side. To secure the joist to the ledger board, we're going to be using joist hangers, and you want to make sure you get the right joist hanger for whatever size joist you have. And this is just going to slide right under here, and we're just going to tack the little pins here at the top into the board first. We're then going to nail it off using the joist hanger nails, and these just nail right into each hole. Just make sure you place one in each hole. And also here in the corner, we got the corner bracket that's going to go here to secure the rim joist to the ledger board as well. And then we still got to connect the ledger board to the house itself here in a moment. But for now, we're going to put the joist hangers on. And these are the 1.5 inch joist hanging nails. That's all there is to installing them, and you'll know if you've been following my channel for a while, I usually use a metal strap nailer when I have a lot of joist hangers to put on, but there's only a handful to put on here, it wasn't worth getting out. When installing the joist hangers, use a pair of needle nose pliers to hold the nails. That way you can avoid hitting your fingers if you find it difficult to drive those short nails. We now need to lag the ledger board to the house, and this is a 5 1/8 inch screw, and these are made by GRK. And these are going to be drove in between the joists. Our pattern is going to be to make sure that we're at least 2 inches from the bottom and 2 inches from the top. Because this 2x12 overhangs onto the foundation a little bit, we actually got to put it up in here, as you can see, because the boards are there. So our pattern is going to be one here and then one here, 2 inches from the top, 2 inches from the bottom. And then over here, we're going to place one. So we're going to use this pattern to go across the whole ledger board. And you'll notice that I'll draw that board tight against the house really well. When driving the screws, do not overdrive them to where the heads are sunk too far into the material. I used to use 1/2 inch lag screws to where I had to pre-drill them first. These go much quicker. For this and the rim joist, we're going to place 2 lags in as well. And this again is not structural as far as holding the weight of the joist for now. Once we put our header on, it will be. But our rim joist, we definitely want to make sure it's secured to the post well. So 2 lags at each side. And to make this look even, I'm going to make sure I center it up. Now that the framing is solid, we're going to finish up the deck boards. Whenever we line the board up on this side, we're going to make sure we have the same overhang. And then once we get to this end, if there's any cutting that needs done, we'll cut it off this end. So to close this gap, we're going to screw a board here for leverage to draw it over. And now we have a lever here. You can see we just pull it. It's going to shut that gap real easy. How you like that? When we designed this deck, we designed it so that we do not have to cut the deck boards to length in order to place them down. So as he hands them up to me, I'm placing them where they go and then partially screwing them down like I explained before. Then after we have them all screwed down, here's an overhead shot of what it will look like. And then after we have them all down ready to go, I'm going to go through and screw them off after the fact. I find it to be quicker and more efficient to do it in that manner. We're now going to build a beam to support these joists. Again, this was a temporary fix, so now we're going to actually place the beam that's going to officially hold the joists. I'm going to get the measurement from the outside of the post to the outside of the post. 1/16 1/8. The material I'm going to be using for the beam are pressure treated 2x10s, and we're going to do a 2-ply, so we're going to double these up and install them 1 ply at a time across the post. All right, we're going to nail this with our galvanized nails at first, and we're going to be tight up against the joist. Before placing the 2nd ply on, I'm going to drive the structural screws in now, and then once we place the other ply on, we're going to apply more. I'm going to do 3 on this side and 3 on this side, and mainly the reason why is because these are just a little over 5 inches long, so I want to make sure I get plenty of penetration. Now we're going to install the 2nd ply. Here. I'm now going to place 2 more structural screws on this side, and then we'll nail the header off. And when we nail that off, we're going to use our galvanized nails, and we're going to stay 16 inches apart and about 2 inches down from the top, and 16 inches apart and 2 inches up from the bottom, and we're going to stagger our nails front and back. Now on this side, when we place it from the back, if the nail is hitting here, we do not want to place a nail on the opposing side there. We want to stagger it so on the other side, we'll try to miss it by going up to here, Then on this side, the stagger away from the stagger joint. Yep. Okay, the header is now installed. Now that we have this header installed, we essentially have this header supporting the floor joist, and we also have this 2x12 that's on the exterior supporting it as well, so we definitely have plenty of support for these joists. Due to the codes in this area, we must connect the joist from the deck to the inside of the house, so that way the deck does not risk being pulled off the side of the house. That's a very bad situation and obviously dangerous, so we need to make sure all of this stays together. And in order to do that per code, we're going to use all thread and using these brackets, and I'll show you the brackets in the box that they came in. To connect the deck joist and the house joist together, I'm going to be using this tension tie kit. Inside this kit, we got our bracket that goes on one joist, our screws to connect the bracket to the joist, and we have a repeat of that here. So that's going to be what connects the joist together. And as far as what we're going to use to bolt the brackets together, we're going to be using a piece of 18-inch, half-inch galvanized all thread, and this is going to connect everything together. In order to install this bracket, we must first drill the hole in through the side of the house, because once this is installed, it's difficult obviously to get your drill in here. So we're going to mark this where it's going to go through the band board, and this is going to be in the center of the joist. So right here looks good. So we must drill that out first to put our all thread through the ledger board and into the band board of the house. Using a 5/8 inch bit, I'm going to drill through the ledger board. I'm now going to remove the nut and washer off the end of the all thread. Going to remove this off the end so we can install our bracket. All we have to do is slide this right over that all thread, and we're going to place the screws that came with the kit and place them in each hole. I'm using a 10mm socket to drive those in. We then replace the washer and nut, and I'm just going to hand thread this on for now and just snug it up. We're now going to address the inside. Now this side, very straightforward. We just repeat that, what we did on the outside. We're now going to place the washer and nut on. I'm now going to snug up the nuts in order to create a tight fit. We are now complete on this side. Be sure to place spray foam in the hole that we created in order to seal up around the all thread. Per code in our area, we must install 2 of these, one on each side of the ledger. So we have one on that side of the ledger board. We must install one on this side. And if you'd like to pick this up, I'll put a link to it in the description below so you can check it out for yourself. We're going to go ahead and build the beam that's going to go from the post to the house. And in order to do that, we're going to go right here along the edge of the rim joist where it intersects into the house and plumb a line. To gain access to the deck from the upstairs, I'm going to cut out the sheathing that's covering up the opening. Another tool that works great for cutting out openings is using a flush bit on a router. You can go right around the opening and it'll literally cut it out to the shape of the framing. Right here at the edge of the rim joist, not at the edge of the decking, because we want to make sure it lines up with the edge of the frame. We're going to hold our level right there to that edge and then plumb up a line to go right up the wall. All right, now that that's marked, we're going to continue the line until we get to the top of the wall. Here is where the beam's going to come through the wall. What we're going to do is place 2 blocks here to help space away from this stud so we can anchor the plies right to the side of this stud essentially. So I'm going to pad this out 2 blocks right now. We're going to do the same on the other side. Now that we got our plumb line, we're going to cut out for a 2-ply 2x10 header. So we need to make sure that we come down the proper distance, which actually we drilled a hole right here where we put those blocks so we can easily get in to cut this out. So if we come down, we want to make sure off the top plate we're coming down far enough. We got 12.5 inches we marked to the bottom. So we want to make sure the 2x10 misses the top plate and cap plate of the inside of the wall, because we'll have to double plate that after we put the header up. So we're going to go ahead and cut this house wrap out of the way and then mark it on the wall before we cut it. Because we're putting sheathing in between the plies of the header, we're going to come over 3.5 inches. And I'm going to drill a hole here to get my sawzall in easier. We're then going to cut this out. All right, we now have that removed so we can get our header through there. We got to do the same on the other side. We are now able to slide our 2x10s in there. We now need to cut this sub-fascia board out of the way. If you remember from my roof video, when we installed these, very simple to do, but now we got to cut it right here because we didn't know exactly where we were going to put this deck at the time, so we went ahead and run it right through. So we're going to cut it right here as long as we're a couple inches away from this edge. Because we got a 10.5 inch overhang on the truss, we can cut this out here anywhere and be safe. So we're just going to square right off the house to get it to we having a measurement to go off of. We'll just say right here should be good. Again, anywhere in here would be fine. And now what he's doing, because we're going to cut the tails off these trusses, and again, these are trusses that have overhangs that aren't doing anything but supplying the overhang. So we can cut these tails off no problem without messing with the engineering of the truss.
If we would have known ahead of time where we were putting the deck before ordering the trusses, we could have easily ordered them without the tails for the area where the deck's going to be. But even though I've done this in the past with this truss manufacturer, be sure to consult with your truss manufacturer to make sure it's okay.
Now that we got the sub-fascia board off, what we can do now is slide a 2x10 into that slot, make sure it's tight against the top plate, and then we're going to level across it to mark our post so we know that we can cut it off level this way very easily. And if you have a laser level, that could work too, but the old-fashioned board with a level works well. He's marking the bottom of the board, and that's going to give us our level mark from here to there so we can cut it off level. Now that we have the post marked, what we did was take a speed square and trace around the post to get our straight lines, and we did that all around the post to give us a guide to cut. And I'm going to use the circular saw to cut this line and this line, and then we're going to finish it off with the sawzall because that's going to be a little safer than getting on a ladder and getting on the post from the ground. So we're going to cut this now. And another option, you can take a chainsaw, but I would clamp 2 boards as a guide so you don't cut into it too much. But I have done that in the past. If you've been following my channel, you'll know I cut posts off with chainsaws as well. I'm now going to finish off the cut using the sawzall. As you can see, we now have the post cut to the correct height, and I'm going to do the same to the other post. We now have the second post cut. You can see the pocket for the headers here. We need to get a measurement from here and come out to the end of this post to get the length of our beam. Yep. Looks like we got 101.5. To build the 2 2x10 double ply headers, what I have here are the 2x10s, and you'll notice I got pressure treated lumber here, and then I have one board here that actually is not, just because we had it left over and we can use it here. Now you technically don't need pressure treated here because it's going to be under a roof and we're actually going to be wrapping it. Now because all they had locally was 2x10s that were pressure treated, we actually grabbed those. So we're just going to place that with this one that is not pressure treated, no problem. So we're going to cut these down to the 101.5 inches.
After cutting all the material out for the headers, you could also assemble this on the ground before placing it up on the post, but we find it's easier just to put it up in plies whenever you have limited help.
Before setting the first ply of the header up on the post, I'm going to nail a kicker block here on the side, so that way we can set the ply up into place and not worrying about falling over the edge of the post. I placed galvanized ring shank nails that are 3 inches long to nail together this header. We're going to set it up into this pocket, then onto the post and nail it to the blocking we placed in the wall. All right, I'm now going to go inside and nail it. To secure this board to the post, I'm just going to toe nail right here at the end into it just to hold it for now, but we're going to nail it off to the post even more later. In order to give us the correct thickness, we're going to place the 1/2 inch OSB in. We'll now add our next ply. Now that the second ply is on, we can nail this off, and how this is to be nailed, we're going to place a nail across the bottom every 16 inches. And then we're going to do the same, but we're going to alternate. So if we put a nail here, we need to place a nail here, then here. Keep that pattern up, and nail that off that way on both sides. I always like to take my hammer and drive those nails in to squeeze those plies together really tight. Now that we have this beam set, we're going to set the other beam.
Like I mentioned earlier, you could assemble this on the ground then place it all up in one piece, but it's just much easier to do it in pieces like we're doing here.
Now to support this side of the beam, we're going to install 2x4s right underneath of it to support the weight. And I'm going to nail this stud to this stud for extra security. I'm now going to do the same to the other side. Yep. Now that we got the beam built and secured, what we're going to do is place a kicker board just like when we set trusses in the previous video. If you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link to it in the description below. But this is going to keep the truss from flipping over the edge, and we're going to put kickers on each side of the beam as well. So we're going to screw this to the deck, and this is a 16-footer running clear to the ground. Then we'll have to extend it up a little bit to finish it up.
We now have this at the correct height, and we added the stiff back to the back of the board to add stability so it isn't near as flimsy, and we're also anchored to the deck itself, so that's going to support the first truss.
Now that we have the stiff back up to catch the gable truss, we're going to screw a 2x4 up here for two things. One is going to keep the post from spreading apart whenever we place this gable truss up here upside down, and it's also going to be a little bit of a guardrail as we install this for safety. I'm now going to screw a kicker block here at the end of the beam. We can't have this up too high, about right here, to catch the end of the truss. I'm now going to double plate the beam. All we have to do here is simply place a 2x4 and then another one on top of that to match the plates on the wall.
If you've been following this series since we started the house build, you'll know when we built the exterior and interior walls, we double plated them as well. The double plating is more critical on the walls because they help support the truss in between the studs.
Here's the gable truss, and if you remember from my previous video, if you've seen that, and if you haven't, I recommend watching it, but we put 10.5-inch blocks here for our overhang to give us a finished 12-inch overhang, and this is our rake, and this goes down to the sheathing that was nailed over the truss before we placed this ladder on. So now all we have to do is simply stand this up and then attach it right in the center between the beams.
As you probably already assumed, if this gable truss was on a bigger deck and we had to lift it up like this, it'd be very difficult. So in that case, we would get a crane if it was.
We're now going to flip this truss upright, and we're going to secure it to the stiff back, and we're going to place it flush to the edge of the beam and make sure it's centered between the beams. All right. We nailed it to the stiff back. We're now going to make sure we're centered really well. We now have the truss flush with the end of the double plates, and all we have to do now is place a block here tight up against it. Now it's sitting where it belongs, so that way we can place a nail or screw in from the back side to hold it to the beam.
This is the initial securing of the truss. We will be installing what are called hurricane ties later on in this video. So I just wanted you to realize that this is not the final securing of the truss to the beam.
Now that we got those on, we can put a 16 on center layout, and we're going to set the end truss and string line it to set the trusses. Now that we have this end set, all we have to do here, this is pretty nice, we can screw it right to the sub fascia to hold it upright until we brace it into the truss. Now all we have to do is put a brace from this peak down just to hold this for now. All right, we're going to plumb this up, and he's going to place the screw on the other side to hold it. All right, we're nice and plumb there. And as we set these, we're just going to run a board across from truss to truss. 16 on center is what these are. If you remember from my previous video, Setting them by hand that way is pretty simple. And all we have to do is run a string line from tail to tail to set the ones in the middle. Here's a 2x4 with the 16 on center layout. We're going to lay it on top here so when we stand up our truss, we can nail right to it to hold it 16 on center as we sit them.
Same idea with the trusses that go in between the gable and the other roof. We would set these with a crane if they're at a large size to where we could not handle them by hand.
We can now stand our trusses up right on the layout and nail it on the beam and on this 2x4.
It's important to make sure that your gable truss is plumb because you're going to be using that to space out the rest of the trusses, so it's going to set the tone for the whole layout. And you can see setting them up into place was very quick and easy by hand, again because they were so small. And here's what they look like after they're all set. We now have a frame to place sheathing on.
We went ahead and put the subfascia board on. So essentially placing this on, all we had to do was take a straight edge to make sure that it is down lower than the plane of where the truss goes, so that way the sheathing will not be humped up like I explained in the roof video previously. And right here where it intersects into this subfascia, you can see it's lined up really well. We just nailed this on with 16 penny nails, and we got to cut that overhang off here. And now we got to put sheathing down here on this side of the roof, so that way we can tie this roof into this roof.
Here's the subfascia board placed on the other side of the roof. When we installed the sheathing on the main part of the roof, we had to make sure we were up taller than the peak of the deck roof. It took 2 rows to get it to that height.
We just ran 2 rows of sheathing. This is going to be so we can frame in the valley where this roof intersects into the roof. Now, if you need to know the details about that, again, check out the roof video. I'm going to go into the details of building this. But for now, I'm going to time-lapse this and give you the overview after I build it.
Something you may not know if you're not familiar with framing, you can buy valley trusses that continue up on the roof so you do not have to hand build it like this. But we find it's a much better job just to hand build it because those valley trusses can be a pain to get right. And you can see we have a nice continuation of our roof up onto the main roof. That's exactly what you want. It should look like a seamless intersection into the main part of the roof. As you can see here, all of our rafters are cut and fit right onto the sleeper board very tight. And after we have that roof built, we simply installed the sheathing right over it to continue the framing of the roof. Now that we have the roof framing done, you can see we have a nice coverage right over the deck. For the roofing, we are installing what are called architectural shingles, and I made a detailed video on this. But essentially, we need to make sure that we intersect again into the main roof shingles properly and cut the valleys in properly. So check out that video in the link description below.
In order to tie the truss to the header, we're going to install what are called hurricane ties. These are code in my area. We must always secure the truss to the wall or header in which the truss sets on. These are extremely easy to install. They'll just sit right there on the top plate, or the cap plate in this case. And they're going to nail using the small joist hanging nails to hold this into place. And that's all there is to it. Now I got to install that at each end of the truss.
The nails that are coming out of this gun are the same gauge nails that we hand drove on to connect our joist hangers to our floor joists. Using this gun made it much quicker, so I would recommend this gun if you have a lot of metal straps to do. And we want to make sure we tie the ends of the beam into the post at the top. That's going to minimize the risk of wind being able to lift up the roof from the top of the deck. So always check your local building codes to see what they recommend that you do there, so that your structure will pass the inspection.
We're going to address the railing now, and in order to install it, we need to install posts here right up against the side of the house. And the reason why that is, we need a place to intersect our railing to, and you could screw it to the finished wall after your siding's on, but I think it's better if you have it separate from intersecting into your siding. I'm going to get a measurement from this header down to the top of the deck, and that's where we're going to set another 6x6 post. 85 1/8.
I'm essentially going to follow the same steps to cut this post as we did when we cut the post off previously in this video, except we're on the ground. It's going to make it much easier to cut this off now compared to what we did previously. So after we cut around all sides with the circular saw, we're going to have it cut to length.
Now that we got the post cut to length, we're going to set it into place, and we're going to hold 3/4 inch off the house. and we're going to make sure we're plumb as well. And we're going to tack the top and bottom down with deck screws. Then we're going to place structural lag screws in the top and bottom after it's set once we have the railing on.
It's best to cut the post to be a little tight than it is to be loose because you want it to be in snugly. And because of that, we need to tap it into place with a hammer, and I recommend protecting the post with a block so you don't leave a bunch of hammer marks around the post for cosmetic reasons.
Now that we got 4 posts to intersect into, as far as railing goes, this is very simple. We simply just got to connect one section to one side then the other, and then we'll have our railing on. So we're going to go ahead and build this out of pressure treated material. An important part here with our codes is we cannot have pickets any further apart than 4 inches. And we also need a finished height that's 36 inches or greater. With that said, we want to make sure that our bottom is up far enough to where it is still within that code as well. So we need to make sure we ain't any higher than 4 inches up off the deck. So if that space, you don't want anybody to be able to go underneath that like a toddler or a baby or anything of that nature. And also check your local codes. It's very important because every area is different when it comes to railing, stair heights, whatnot. So you definitely need to check your local building codes before building your railing. So I'm going to go ahead and get all this pre-cut, then put it together and show you what we got. To build the railing, we have 30.5-inch blocks that are simple 2x4s that were cut down. We are going to put a bevel on here for decoration more or less using the miter saw. We're then going to have a 2x6 frame, and the top of the railing is going to be 2x6 as well. So that way it's nice to sit something on top of it, and it also provides enough strength. As far as the stability, we need to make sure it can handle force of a human being pushed up against it. So very important to build your railing very strong. I'm going to go ahead and assemble all this railing and get it together, then I'll show you the final product.
To cut the bevel on the bottom of the pickets, I'm going to slide the miter saw to the 45-degree mark and lock it into place. We're then going to place our 2x4 upright and then cut the end off flush with the length that we had it cut before. I'm going to do that to all the pickets before building all the railing, so that way we don't have to stop in between railings to cut them. What we have placed together is more or less a frame that's going to hold the pickets. We ripped down a piece to fit at the top in order to screw the top of the pickets to. And then here at the bottom we have a full 2x4 to connect the bottom of the pickets to. And also in the middle is where we are going to start with a full 2x4 that goes down to the decking, so that way it supports the whole railing in the center. So as we start the center, we're going to space them out properly using scrap pieces of 2x4, so we'll have 3.5 inches in between the pickets, as you can see here. And this is what's going to create such a strong railing, is the thickness of the pickets and also the 2x6. And once we got to the end to come out even, we ripped one down to finish up each side, as you can see here, so that way everything's spaced out evenly as well. We're going to install this similar to how we installed the post. We're going to tap it into place using a hammer and a block to protect it, and we're then going to anchor it to the post on each end. And that's where you want to use structural screws to make sure that we are holding in strongly. And once you build one, you'll have a good pattern and system down so that everything goes together real smooth and quick. So getting the pattern together is really the hardest part. So once you figure that out, it's definitely smooth sailing and quick from there. And I always like to take my time to get these right. And you may notice that once you get to the end, you might have to space out the top or bottom a little more compared to the other top or bottom, so that way it comes out even against the end of the frame. Like I mentioned about the post, you want to make sure everything fits together snug, and you need to keep in mind that pressure treated material, or any wood in general, if it is damp, will shrink. So whenever you place this together tight, don't be surprised that there is still a little shrinkage once the pressure treated material cures out.
The only downside to pressure treated material that's going to be exposed and not wrapped is it does need stain on it. The deck boards, the railing, the post, all of it that's going to be exposed definitely needs treated with stain. And what you need to do is make sure that your material cures out really well to where it's dry. You can pour a little water on it, and if you notice it does not bead up and it soaks into the material, it's ready for the stain. Now if you pour the water on, it's still beading up like it is if I did it now. You are not ready to place stain on it yet because it needs to dry out a little more.
Here it is, the finished deck. This is one of my favorite parts of any build. Stepping back and seeing what started as nothing but a concrete footer and turned into something that you can actually actually use and enjoy. With applying stain every year or two, this is something that's going to last for many, many years. The view off this covered deck over the pasture and the valley is quite breathtaking, as you probably noticed. If you want to see exactly how we started this whole house project as far as the site prep, layout, rough drawing the house plans, and getting started, you can join my course membership right here on YouTube and see the course videos for members only. It also directly supports the channel, and if you're watching from a TV, you can scan the QR code that's right here on screen right now, and it'll take you straight to the course membership page, and that's where you can join on YouTube.
This railing turned out really nice. I really like the 2x6 design and how strong it is and sturdy, but that's what you want for railing, especially when it comes to being an elevated deck like this. You want safety to be number one. And something I like to mention, when it comes to finishing up along this top, there's two things. One, we need to add another ply of material here eventually, and we also need to build a little 2x6 knee wall more or less to fill in from here to here, so it'll look like one continuous beam by the time it's said and done. And we're replacing vinyl ceiling and recessed lights here, so you need to make sure you follow along to see how that gets finished up. And if you don't know, this is part of the How to Build a House video series where we started building this house from the foundation up. So I highly recommend that you check out that series, and I'll put a link to it in the description below so you can check it out. And if you would like to see how we framed this roof so you know how we tied the roof into the other roof, check out this video. It'll help you out.